So the team in the background have been working on different options, a little bit of history on how we're tackling this project. So I'm not going to talk for them. I think the best person to actually talk about this is Chris and the team. So everyone knows Chris, Ed, and Jess, and we will get straight into it, Chris. So I think, Wayne, how are we going to be doing the clicking?
I'm going to go this one.
Okay, so that's all you need to do, Chris, and then you can do that as well. And anyone online have questions and stuff, just put your hands up and we will answer. And then let me just hand over to Mr. MC David Screws is in the house.
Thanks, Gareth. For anyone who hasn't been terribly close to this, a couple of months ago, Council approved a project steering group, which is made up of elected members and staff, and it is led by Councillor Sanders. And so we've had, I think, 3 meetings so far, sort of going over the last almost 8 to 10 years of planning and ideas and all of that kind of stuff. It's been consolidated into sort of a summation of what we're about to be presented today. And the idea of today is to continue the direction that we're on, get feedback from everybody in the room here just to make sure, I guess, the PSG are on the right sort of trajectory of where we're heading in preparation for budgeting into the LTP. So over to you, Mr. Jack.
Sure, thanks, David. Everyone, I know we've got a bit to get through today, but just I really, having had that weekend, just really want to acknowledge David, Gareth, your teams. Amazing. How good was that weekend? Just it was a pretty full program that you've pushed through there, but to see that facility celebrated by community that way was a pretty wonderful moment and really privileged to be part of it. So yeah, thanks team. Massive effort. Yeah, thanks. So just the next slide just probably gives a bit of an overview of the agenda today. As David had mentioned, we've since meeting with you and doing the walk around, we've had a few meetings with the PSGs. Some work we've been doing so really today is to share, I guess, what we heard from that walk around and the feedback that we got. And so we just want to summarise that today and make sure we've understood that correctly and how that's inputted to particularly some of the work we've done to evolve the options and what our focus has been on that, how we're developing that. So we aren't sort of finished on that piece of work yet because we do want to see feedback here. We have a sort of direction of travel from a longer list that we've been working through with PSG and how we might start to form some evaluation. So we're sort of going to share that today. And obviously the next steps we sort of look at to some decisions and inputs into the, the reporting LTP. So there's a few words up front, a few pictures at the back end. So hopefully we can hold you through that conversation. And we won't go on this. It's just a kind of a reminder, obviously, that that's our outcome. That's the vision we're sort of keeping in mind, and that has inputted to the way we're starting to investigate some of these, options in particular. That next slide. So, what did we hear both in the walk around and with the subsequent feedback? I thought just useful this slide up. Part of the track we all walked on the day, but it's also just maybe referencing the particular precincts and how they've been referred to within the master plan in particular, and how we'll talk to them with some of the aspects of today. I think it was clear, and that's going, I guess, into the report, and the purpose of this work was to really refocus the efforts on Northwest and the opportunity that brings, but look towards the Gateway precinct and Big Fruit, because we obviously have not only a greater sort of council-owned opportunity there, but they're both sort of greenfield, brownfield opportunities to do something new and significant to potentially bring height and density and to maybe really catalyse the regeneration. I think there was seemed to be a consensus around looking at those sites for sort of highest and best use, and a little bit more about that later in terms of what those might be. But that big fruit has got its own identity and is sort of, it is the anchor destination and gateway into the town centre, and one that you still see the visitors kind of stopping. If at the moment they're doing anything, they're probably at least taking that photo and refueling, and we want them to stay longer. So really leveraging what that is as the town's kind of identity and front door, and sort of working that into this particular piece of work stream to really make that bigger and better. And as I said, so leverage that council-owned land. And so really this is then building on where might the civic facilities, library and open space play a role in this piece of work. And also be very focused on, the access and parking. Not only is this particular enabling work stream on Murray Terrace, but we want to make sure that we're looking at the longer view, short term, and how not only capacity and growth, but how there might be other measures. And I think there's some good feedback through that walk around how that might be managed, what other opportunities for that management exist. I'll scoot through these next ones quickly. It's so I guess Gateway, it sort of recognises that it's the front door to the town. There is a strong greenfields opportunity. I think the master plan acknowledged that, particularly around I guess what's, we all talked about is the gateway corners, those kind of visible pieces that really signify the entrance from both sides as you move into the town centre. That those have a range of use possibilities, but I think, getting some density and height near, I think was something that was strongly supported across the group. We didn't seem to see a strong direction or consensus for civic facilities, and that was probably better still working towards the heart. So that was kind of Gateway. Associated with Gateway, the next slide sort of talks to Big Fruit and I guess the reserve aspect of Big Fruit. I think again, strong opportunity to keep leveraging that as the kind of, the front lawn or the destination, the reserve recreational aspect. What that might be as an evolution. So, the talk around the destination play space that might sort of speak not only for the community, but they become attractors for tourists and visitors. What might have been expanded events offering potential, and it could support further growth and parking, particularly if we start to look at some other activities commercially or otherwise. But strengthening connections across Murray Terrace into the town centre and where that might be. I think there was a strong sentiment about working not only the visible connections, but the physical connections. As we sort of move into the, I guess the mall and Northwest Precinct, I think everyone agreed the Murray Terrace alignment was a great enabling opportunity. It's obviously dealing with a number of access and safety improvements for vehicles into the town centre. But in creating an expanded Northwest, there's a real opportunity to see Northwest as a kind of opportunity for seeing growth managed and new building stock and new opportunities for private investment leveraged there. So, but then it's, I think in looking at that evolution, towards a more Main Street kind of typology. So not only in the way that it sort of mixes, still brings traffic and people into the town and has that access, but that kind of pedestrian experience, how it might be activated more by retail, other new building stock coming in. So this kind of more evolution of Murray Terrace into that kind of Main Street feel. If we go to Northwest Precinct and unlocking that obviously a more expanded opportunity, and that really is your opportunity to bring density, bring height, and meet that growth potential. And I think as was all acknowledged, it's really an opportunity to sort of see that private investment partnership opportunities there. So that not constraining it too much, I think there'll be. I think it was clear we looked at it and said there needs to be some linkages, but how you sort of evolve unlocking that through planning is not to kind of over structure, I guess, the opportunity so that the market may influence and decide where that best use might head. Car parking, as I sort of mentioned, we really want to just make sure we've got that. If we're looking to sort of build to that growth, we still need to make sure we've got the right balance of access and parking. There seem to be, I think there's clear direction to look at how the short-term, long-term, long stay all day is managed and where there might be best efforts for that outside the town centre precinct to and to free up, parking and access within the town centre from the town centre itself. And that all needs to be aligned with growth potential. So we've got a little bit more detail later to speak to that. I think it's clear that I think although it was acknowledged the town needs a heart, it needs a place for people to kind of congregate and gather, that there seemed to be sentiment that the mall's a bit of the potential of the mall's a bit of a struggle. Without significant investment, I guess, in acquisition in existing building stock, to really do the things that the master plan envisaged and what the community acknowledged and what we've all sort of been on a journey with. How do we open this up? How do we right size it? How do we kind of leverage it? And obviously you've still then got a lot of existing stock that needs uplift to meet that kind of change. And because it's not directly connected to Northwest, you sort of see those benefits flow. So I think we heard that loud and clear. And that's, I guess, influenced some of the discussion and direction with PSG and the options. And so if you sort of reflect back on that spatial framework, a lot of what we've discussed on site and kind of evolved through these discussions is still exists in that kind of, I guess the master plan intent, the gateway aspects to the big fruit and the gateway precinct, the sort of realisation that there's still recreational aspects to that Northwest is your best opportunity to bring that growth potential and provide new opportunities that would have new attractors for private investment and the types of building stock that would attract those tenants and what you're missing out on at the moment. I guess the question mark to that was, I think the work done, to give me the big question mark on the next slide. There we go. And really, what has evolved since that master plan is obviously the Murray Terrace alignment, really galvanising Northwest as a real opportunity to bring that density and growth, but acknowledging the challenges that are facing the mall in terms of its kind of regeneration potential. So I guess that's where the questions have come to and where this particular piece of work is focused on. So what does that mean? I guess what we did then is consider a number of options. And so I think the next slide speaks to, just before they do, I guess maybe scoot to the next slide. And part of that master plan reflection, just to sort of see that we're not a million miles away from where we were, and I think it's important to recognise that. The number of that feedback through that engagement that you did is all the things that we've talked about when we're standing in the middle of the mall, things that we need to consider, I guess, and even a reconsideration of repositioning the mall where the centre might be. And so, if you sort of substitute out the mall word there, it's still conversation around how do we open up, how do we connect to the north, how do we, link the big fruit, link to Northwest opportunity. So there's similar conversations there, just maybe not directly around that whole conversation. So we, I guess, considered as this exercise is focused on with that context and with that kind of, I guess, fresh look and the direction from the report is what might alternative locations be for civic facilities and maybe this associated town square, if we want to call it that, open space that really considers the CODC land that is available and ready to go, without the encumbrance of the challenges we're facing. But it does still address that, I guess, the feedback as we had been through and heard, but also the core principles that underpin the master plan and importantly are sort of looking at that North Star direction. but really start to leverage the enabling opportunity that Murray Terrace brings and those benefits that could flow from unlocking Northwest, given that there's this kind of momentum opportunity sitting there, but it still becomes an enabler for that renewal opportunity. So as always with these things, you go a bit long to go short. And it's sort of testing some of those previous iterations. And so we've worked through with PSG on this to kind of go wide quickly. You know, we know we've kind of optioned this forever, but you know, you always sort of with these fresh set of eyes want to make sure you're considering what has been there before. I guess we can fail fast because we've got good evidence that sits beside those decisions. And so we've got to a kind of shorter list on the next page, which is, I guess, being an underpinning that is still, you know, what do we need? How do we provide some discussion and evaluation to get the right direction of travel? So we've got some themes that have sort of flowed from that previous work and some of the recent discussions, so that we can do some assessment and come back with some recommendations. So from that longer list, where we've got sort of 4 in the mix, and the reason we've still got one sort of sitting there was probably the best evolution out of the original master plan direction. So it's a good baseline to consider, and it still does a lot of the things that you're trying to achieve, but it comes with a lot of encumbrances, given what we've just talked about, and given the shift in what we're discussing around that northwest uplift, it doesn't necessarily leverage the benefits of it. So yeah, that's kind of in there for that context. Number 2 was looking at almost a bridging link opportunity where civic facilities kind of straddle between Northwest and the existing mall, so maybe become a bit more of a link towards where the heart may be shifting or the centre of gravity might be shifting.
I think we just have a question. Yeah.
What's that?
We've got a question there.
Question, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. From that February meeting, we seem to have had quite a significant shift from what was discussed in February to now, and it's been very centred around shifting the civic centre, which wasn't my recollection of the meeting in February. So now it seems to be, the direction seems to have changed. Can I have some comment on that, please?
That post the walkthrough that we had? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, that was during that walkthrough when we were there. We discussed, I mean, the civic centre wasn't the centre of the universe at the point of that discussion. It was about creating that public-private partnership and engaging there to maximise the use of those areas. And now I'm not sure what's happened, or if I'm just misunderstanding. Yeah, it seems like it's all centred around the civic centre.
I wonder if that's just part of the presentation right now, that it's part of the civic centre as being the key piece. If we continued on to the end of the presentation where we're talking about the totality of where we're heading so far, and then maybe if that question's still pertinent at the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That might give some more context. I mean, just to be clear though, what we understand this process is looking at locations for civic facilities.
Yeah.
And I guess, Tracy, just to clarify, when you're talking about civic centre, are you referring to the civic facilities?
Civic facilities.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that was, my understanding was that was not the driver. That was not going to be the centre driver of all of this. But anyway, I'll wait till the end. Just if you could keep that in mind, and that might, whether it's been addressed or not, we might come back to that. Thank you.
You got it.
So so it's not the key driver, but what we committed to was looking at the entire CBD in its entirety. So we're not isolating ourselves into
Yeah, okay. It's just different to how it was presented at that walk around. But anyway, we'll keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Rick. I'll go through and then maybe we come back to it once I've been through the other slides.
Okay.
So, right, the next, so I guess if we look at the option one, this I guess considers the previous kind of baseline of where the civic facilities would sit within the existing mall, and in order to I guess realise the expanded growth and potential of the mall would require, you know, a number of property acquisitions to start to achieve that, you know, more visibility, more access, a kind of right sizing for the future. And then how it would relate to an expanded northwest. So, you know, to realise that benefit and link northwest to an expanded centre, you would obviously need, you know, start to look at improving those connections. And then how you would start to link through to, you know, a kind of developed gateway precinct and how those things might link up. Next slide. And so this option really starts to think about, well, if we have this expanded northwest now with the straightening of Murray Terrace and where the big gravity of new growth potential comes, but we're still trying to see how what's the role of the mall and the repositioning of that, with maybe a slight centre of gravity shifting towards an expanded northwest, then this option considers, well, maybe the sort of civic heart is shifted to sort of energise and galvanise the opportunity that northwest brings, and largely leaving northwest to, you know, to maximise and optimise that private investment opportunity, but start to catalyse it by maybe addressing and you know, using the civic facilities as an anchor for that opportunity. Still requires a number of buildings to be acquired to realise, you know, I guess an activation within the existing mall and what might be this new open space on the other side. What it does start to do is when you consider maybe a more civic space on that sort of northern side, is it does start to link towards Murray Terrace and the destination play space. So it really does the things you've been talking about in the mall, but with less acquisition and potentially more growth built in. And so you suddenly have opened up to the north, you've opened up to that potential growth across the Big Fruit Reserve. And then, you know, kind of leaves those Barry Ave, Warringah Drive opportunities for a commercial uplift on the corners there. Option 3 is kind of an iteration of that, but probably it really maximises the COBC land, particularly, you know, the existing car park site. So it sort of looks at minimal acquisition. It's probably one of the lowest options that is minimal acquisition. We still think if you were exploring this one to benefit the sort of more, you know, that connection linking a new open space through the mall, but, you know, sort of considering a sequence of open spaces would realise some benefits to mall, but it would sort of be in a place that maybe catalyses this, again, northwest because of its proximity, opens again up to the north, opens to the destination play and the Big Fruit Reserve. So, you know, probably sits again at this kind of more centre of where the growth potential and these new opportunities exist within the broader town centre precinct. Each option is similar in terms of the way it would look at where those growth for car parking and numbers would be managed, and I'll be able to do a bit more detail on that when we get to that slide. 4 sort of considers, well, we did a number of options that looked at northwest and said, well, you know, there is a high proportion of land that's in council ownership there. So what if, and this site was probably the one out of the number of ones that we tested where it's not probably taking some of those key opportunities within the northwest. Again, it's kind of, if you look at the northwest growth potential, do you want to be depressing that growth by maybe adding in community facilities, then you might be better to leverage the, the greater capacity for the private investment. But this kind of anchors that corner of the site, still allows, that visibility in the wider expanded northwest. And then has a kind of, again, a sort of new town square. It would probably rely on other, as you can see, a sort of mixed use development block in there to give the open space some definition and start to activate it in its own way. So it's starting to rely on some of those other private investments to shape it in some way.
Just bringing a play station in town square, there's probably lots of kids running over roads. What about that?
Yeah, and it's, there's a number of ways to manage that through, active and passive means, I think. And how you would start to realise the design in this would be a process. I think you'll see in the visualization that we share. I think there are ways that you might sort of, where's the priority? Is it kind of pedestrians and it's a kind of raised table and it's more shared, so you actually are slowing cars down because the priority is pedestrians. You can still have controls on how you would cross, right? It's not free for all. Then you might still fence aspects of the play area, right? So it's kind of safe, but you would sort of want to use those design levers to still feel like it's connected but safe. And equally within each of those open space options, you might still allow traffic to be moving through, but again, you're just trying to slow and detune everything down. So I think you want to start really ramping up the pedestrian experience, that priority for everyone to walk down. Yeah. So maybe Tracy, should I keep going on parking, or do you want to just reflect on that? And as David said, I think it's, this is obviously looking at different locations for civic facilities, but it's within the context of expanded, the longer term vision. And I guess, as I mentioned, maybe is that evolution of the master plan, which is the Murray Terrace straightening, that kind of opening up of Northwest. I think it's, and the challenges around it, right? I think we heard very clearly there's not as much appetite to look at acquisition. So I think if you do those things, you have to look at it holistically. If you're going to see, you still need to, what is the lever to the council to catalyse that regeneration potential? What have you got as an activator and a move that could start to provide opportunity? So if you're going to see Northwest as a more density, more high opportunity for mixed use, so there is people, more shops, maybe better suited to an evolving, the demand that will come from better building stock. People can work there commercially and they might live there. Then, what role does a civic facilities and maybe an open space and how that connects plays in that? So that's really what we've been exploring as a kind of holistic look.
I wonder even if anyone on the PSG, like Rebecca, Charlie or Sarah, if got anything to add to that.
I think that we've got to be careful what we do actually around close into the town, especially with the civic centres. I just don't see that as being potential for future development and opening up of the mall. And let's face it, we need to get away from the mall situation, make it much more user friendly and open to people actually wanting to congregate in there. So really, I'd like to see more of the town square in the bow tie area. Either the civic centre remains where it is and gets developed a bit better, or you move it out somewhere where there's plenty of parking, because most of the plans that I've seen for where the civic centre is sited is just purely drop off, pick up scenarios. One of the problems I see with it. At this stage, we just need to be looking at the next 30 years, but I think that's the next 60 years. What's that song?
as a group, I think our direction of travel was how, like, not so much what right now though, it's how do we do that? I think, Tracy, it might even come back to what you've said. The early conversations have been about how we enable that development to be a springboard. Because the path we've travelled so far is how do we do it ourselves? And we every time just know that we can't. And that's as far as we've got. And being truthful, we can't open them all up to make it a vibrant town square without doing a hell of a lot of work. And we've worked out, it's out of our scope. So I think there's obviously a lot of different opinions so far in that PSG, but not really necessarily all on even the same book yet, maybe. But that's good.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, when we had that walk around and what we were talking about and the direction of travel that I understood it to be was that obviously the Murray Terrace realignment, yep, we're all in agreement there. The Northwest precinct was going to be, that was going to be the start of the development and the rest will follow. Obviously the bow tie, that was all talked about as well for that commercial development and parking. But now one of the options is talking about acquisitions. That was completely off the table last time. And now it seems like it is back on. I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit, I'm lost. And we're going back around in the same circle that we've already been on.
I think the discussion today has been that acquisitions are not favoured.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we've taken that approach as a group.
But to be
But it
realistic,
was in the options.
at some point there has to be acquisitions done. And it's the old story, isn't it? It's no time like the present. It's never cheaper than what it is today.
Yeah, but what are you buying? That's the conversation. We've gone around in a different circle. We don't provide the middle of the mall to do anything with it because it's not value for money. So I think the argument path at the moment is where do we do it? But it's not, the civic facilities are an activator of a space, but they're not the be all and end all of getting this done because there's other things around it. And it's getting them all to tie in. But if we don't look at where we're going to put our buildings and how we direct this, then we're going to let other people dictate that to us. And so it's about having the district plan changes and realigning the road. We're guiding that without having to necessarily go and build the building first. But we don't want to put ourselves in a position to have to build it to make the rest happen. And I think that's where we got to in the first few meetings. So we're fair to say that how do we do it without going and spending another 45.8, which incidentally would be on budget if we did it. So
I just like
did it very well.
I'd just like to say this is concepts. So we're not doing a fixed plan yet. This is about what it could look like over the next 30-year future.
Yeah.
And it is about how we enable this so that we can cite private investment into this area.
And I think that's the key word on this is enable. How does council enable? Not how does council produce and design and say, here's all these beautiful buildings. How do we enable that private sector? Because there's way more money than we are wanting to spend in there. But if there are little tweaks that we can put into place to free up better size, better shape, better pathway.
But scoping out where we want our buildings to be and how
our
we
buildings are our home too.
100% that's got to be involved, even if it's not the first thing that we put in. We've got to be able to put ours in as and when and
Because
hold reins.
those private investors want to know that you're committed to your town centre.
100%.
And then they will be interested in, because they understand the value of those activators, because once you've committed and you see the vision, they know what those amenities provide for people, for workers, for people who live there. So they're interested because if that's an uplift and those amenities and activators are there, then there's more value for them to be investing right next to those things because they know what they bring in terms of people, activation, opportunity, events. So that's an attractor. I mean, there's an option on the table here, Tracy, that has no acquisition requirement at all. And I guess we would, as we stepped away from the mall, we were investigating the potential of the balance of the site, because I guess that has some of that's been done before, but it hasn't really been a focus of those previous iterations. So I think it's always the way that you just need to throw the cards on the table and and then reflect on those. And if that's a very high criteria, then there is an option on the table that doesn't need it, and but you also need to look at the other benefits that might, or challenge that flow from it.
So at the end of the day, the only way to fix the mall is to open it up so that people will want to come into it. So how do you sell that to the people in the mall? That's like, we keep going around in circles from what I see. It's all hinged on the mall and hoping that develop one part of it to create the need for the owners to do something with what they've got.
Yep.
So
Look, it comes into that kind of have confidence in the mall. When we met with a lot of the mud groups over the last couple of years, people have been really eager to do something, but they weren't confident to have the first step. So therefore it's leaning back on council making the first step to commit. And also the start of the master plan happened when you thought that the willow tree was going to grow into a commercial area. That probably hasn't developed to the scale that was potentially a higher risk when the first conversations have been happening. So by doing this here and making it into a plan, by doing the plan changes, which are another lever within council's remit, to then promoting how growth can happen, is then giving confidence to the current mall owners that yes, town centre is staying here. We are committing to this place and we can all upgrade it. Another part of the project is looking at what town centre design guidelines could be and to how we renovate the buildings that you've got. How you area. So by instilling confidence in the current mall owners that this is where we are committing to as a town and district, can enable them to move forward. That I touch on it.
I think also just is that if we move to focus more on the west and get that going, creates a lot more GFA people, businesses and activation, which then affects the mall because you've got more people, more potential customers, and then in terms of the whole of the regeneration of the town centre, the northwest becomes an activator. And then in time, if the owners of the malls will see more customers, it will happen over time and it'll regenerate itself.
We're just such an awkward and unique position in how the mall was developed. It isn't like any other town in New Zealand where there has been natural regeneration because things have become old and they need to be upgraded to keep up with state of play. It's all just sat stagnant. So by actually committing to this as the town centre, this is going to have potential for buildings to uplift tenancies. If you don't keep on that train, you will be left behind. So there is a sort of pressure put on by doing new things in the mall rather than just going, we're still the new stuff down in industrial area. We're doing all this is density back.
yeah, it's like Groundhog Day to me, sorry. I've seen the whole thing happen in the old main street where there was a talk of a dam and people did nothing to their buildings because they knew that they were going to be inundated and compensated in one way or form or size to the new shopping centre. And now we've got the same thing happening, 40, 50 years on. A way for the council to give some lead into what they can do. And there must be a few of them that are hoping that, they're going to buy my building. It's just a no-brainer, they'll knock my building down for a pathway through here, open it all up. We've just got to be careful that we just don't close what's already enclosed even more, I guess.
I don't think our ratepayers would want us to be spending our money on buying multitude of businesses within the mall.
No, they won't.
No. We're going to invest in what we already own.
Yeah, but you're hardly going to get a shopkeeper that says, "Oh, look, for the good of the community, I'm going to knock my building down and turn it into a footpath."
No, but we're not expecting them to.
No, I know that.
If we start in the northwest precinct, then that gives floor area and tangible development where acquisitions don't necessarily have to be monetary, right? We can do obviously like you've seen in the past.
Yeah.
But I don't think the first logical step would be an acquisition of a building for the sake of creating open space. I think it could be 3 steps down the track where people actually, by the time you actually get things rezoned and structures in place and buildings up, it's going to take a few years, right? And when you're going to get a new population of people working and living and eating in the new part of the town centre, that's when the acquisitions will become pretty apparent.
And you'll have a kind of tangible something to look at for an investor to kind of go, I can see that vision and where that direction is and whether I'm interested to be a part of that or not, right? Because you understand what your commitment and what role you're playing in that. Because I guess at the moment you've got a very clear example of private investment. You've left it to private investment, hasn't it? So there's that's a real example sitting up there right now. And council investment's been limited, right? So this is kind of sitting there for that sort of lack of uplift and clarity. Who's going to put the line in the sand? And have a clear path
That highlights that it's been left to private investment to uplift and nothing's happened, which shows private investment doesn't want this. As in what we've got,
In the current environment.
more.
the more.
Well, and for
The offerings that we have currently are not attractive to external capital
It's in current state.
in its current state
and your community.
and the community.
Yes.
No.
It's not really too complicated. That's all.
They think we've got to
Keep weighing that against other options.
Yeah.
It's a complicated mess because there's lots of different owners.
And I think that's why we see growth in the industrial sector, which should be growth in the town centre, right? So again, this piecemeal approach all over our district, and we want to try and contain it. And
I think there's a question online.
Nathan.
Yeah, yeah, just following on from what Tamer said with the whole trying to be more attractive or attract that investment. My recollection of the last conversations or the last session I was involved in was trying to push more commercial out to that bow tie area. To bring in that attraction. So with these options that we're sort of seeing this morning, to me it doesn't kind of appear that's as much a bigger focus as what I thought we'd gone with. And also, I don't know, it's longer term than probably what I was thinking, but the realignment or moving of civic facilities and new library and all the rest of it, I thought we were sort of giving the steer to leave the civic facilities alone in that civic precinct. And also on that thought of identifying how the mall functions at the moment or its perceived dysfunction, like even looking at this option that's on the screen at the moment, are we not just making an expanded, greater dysfunctional mall? And I know, what's in that northwest precinct isn't, it's not a final thing at all. But yeah, to me, it just looks like we're growing the possible issue or perceived dysfunction that we already have. So yeah, I really thought our steer was push more towards the bow tie area, leave the civic alone, because obviously the council, what's the affordability of building new civic facilities and libraries, even if we own that land? Yeah, so that was just my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
I think that you're right, that developers would look at the bow tie area and take on a development there. And you could do the northwest as part of that, parts of it. Yeah, just what we've got to try and do, I guess, is coax some of the people out of the mall into the new area.
But in folks could walk the main road,
Yeah.
not out of the mall, because it's not humming, it's not really in it, off the main road. And that's my only worry with these options going through is how much of that Big Fruit Reserve is tagged for car park. People don't turn off the main road for a car. I don't think that's the right place to be parking huge amounts of cars. Yeah, totally agree. See, it's environment that still works. Maybe it is a destination. It's not obviously there been some marketing, but yeah, I just think that is a lot of beautiful green space on the entrance to our town that we're looking to cover in concrete and fill with car.
I think the elephant in the room is car parking, where basement car parks and parking buildings are really needed, but it sucks how expensive they are, right? So who's going to want to build it? Because I think Nathan actually had a fair call that if we were honest, that probably is just as dysfunctional as the current mall. If you were 30 years down the track, you'd be like, oh, we should knock out one of those buildings to open that area up or something, right? So I think something a bit more linear parallel with Murray Terrace could be a goer. But it's the location and amount of parking which is going to really determine how usable any given space is.
Maybe even we just talk a little bit about parking, because it's just interesting to put in context the growth that, you know, to meet that demand. I think maybe just expanding a little bit on that, because I guess reflecting on the growth potential and obviously in meeting that growth potential, what that delivers in terms of real economic benefit to the community and to the council, you know, you do need most of those yellow blocks, if not more, to meet that demand. So I guess you could say, yes, we put more on the big fruit, or we find the right balance. I guess the private investment still, if they're going to build there, they want car parks, because that will sort of need to meet particular demand of those commercial resident accommodation otherwise on there. But I think we need to sort of also be mindful that we're not sort of continually strengthening the edges of this town and letting the centre just kind of fail. And so how do we find that balance to, you know, because we do need all that kind of growth potential, if not more, through some of that future in those existing building stocks. If you were really to unlock and realise the true potential of growth, given the numbers that you need for the GFA, and not just sort of sit there with unmet demand or unmet opportunity.
It was funny because I had the exact conversation about car parks with the developer last week, and he said, you let me worry about car parks. This is my business. I know how many car parks I need. If I build too many, it's bad for business. If I don't build enough, it's bad for business. I don't need the council to tell me and where they should go, because that factors in as part of there. So if we're opening up these opportunities for developers, then part of that is their problem, and part of it is our problem. So let's not take all of their problems on behalf of the residents.
You know, I understand that. Yep. So you want to have a plan for maybe, say, as you say, and this is to your point, I think, but it's where do you want to make sure you're freeing up that open space, or your priority?
Beautiful green grass, ideally.
Does the key to all of this, though, depend on where the civic facilities are going to be? I mean, if we actually look at that and say, right, we're going to put civic facilities right smack in the middle of the whole development, does that limit what's available for commercial developers?
I think there's two ways to look at that. So you might say it's a prime spot that other people might want, but you also make it a place that people have to go into the mall to get to, because that is one of the issues. When the Paper Plus and Post Office and Mitre 10 were inside the mall, people had to go into the centre of the mall to use those businesses and those services.
Yeah.
Once they moved to the edge of the mall, that was when people stopped going in there. So if you've got your library in the middle of it, then people are going to go into the centre of it. So I think that it activates that space more than us rebuilding on the periphery, which is, you know, when Charlie was talking about, you know, businesses, if we shut off the space by building around the edges of it, how will businesses feel like they want to develop their own spaces, which is why activating the centre of it is probably a sensible idea. So putting our things in the centre activates the centre.
I wasn't suggesting that we don't put it there. What I was saying is, you know, should we actually reach a point where we decide that's where we want it to be, so that the developers can work around that? Because developers might want to be very close to civic facilities and very, very close to the library, for example.
So it might help reactivate some of the buildings that are already in the spaces. So when we're talking about private business going, well, why would I do anything to my building if there's nothing else happening? If people are back in the centre, we might see more activity in that space.
Right, can you just flip back to option 3 for a sec?
I think like. I think Tamar makes a really good point that we don't want to tar seal the bow tie as much as we possibly can. And then Charlie also makes the point the town square should be in the bow tie. And I think both of those, they kind of marry up quite nicely, right? If like if you're going to be replacing any of the green space, it should be replaced with some good public space in there. So just my personal opinion on that would be moving the town square more towards being adjacent to this destination play space, and then freeing up a lot more of Murray Terrace to have retail shops along the front of it. That's just my 2 cents from thinking about it. If we need to put car space anywhere, have that car space in the southern end of the northwest precinct where cars can come in off the highway and come in and park there in a big parking lot and then move and then walk on to Murray Terrace if need be. Yeah, anyway, my 2 cents.
I might just add in here some of the other, we've only met a few times, the conversations have been, Cromwell's been a drive-by town. So you're driving through on the way to Wanaka or Queenstown. How do we get people to pull over and buy a coffee, have a play, have a scone, have a muffin, all of that kind of stuff? And some of the conversations that have been around the PSG have been, how do we get people to stop? But then how do we get locals to want to come and be here and spend a bit of time? It's a bit of a destination within itself. And we as a group also looking at things in 2D like this, it's really hard to imagine what could or couldn't be there because it's hard with or without scale and what could actually develop here and could it look like. And the team, I think, might flip through it soon, but just getting a bit of a feel of what different concepts could look like. And remember, we are only at like enablement stage, that we don't have money in the LTP currently or prioritisation in the LTP for the development of this as well. So I think it's just important to go back to this as how do we, I guess, enable this as a project for the community and us, but then enable it as a project of the future, be it 5, 10, 15, 30 years, and look towards what those priorities might be for us over that period too. So, yeah, we just kind of continue that lens as well.
And I think that really future focused thing that we're talking about is CapEx for the growth.
Yeah.
But what does it mean when that growth also brings public transport and public transport is terminating there or travelling to and from Wanaka and Queenstown and all of those things. So
Yeah.
we don't have public transport in 30 years' time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got other levers just to put it out. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly how you manage that demand. And we place it. I mean, there's also an evolution within the plan, and you might sort of, start somewhere, but kind of know that that's actually best use later of something else. So you can sort of manage your way through that through some of the phasing. And yeah, as you say, you can meet that demand through a really concentrated process of saying, well, you go vertical because you just want to, you've got the best spot and you concentrate that, you want to optimize the rest of the land for that benefit. Yeah, I hear Mike. I think
there's option 3. This was the one that had the least acquisition. Was that right?
Correct. Yeah. So the only one, and you wouldn't even have to do it if you sort of, I think hearing the conversation earlier, and we were, I guess, in reviewing this, we're mindful that the mall doesn't get left behind. It has maybe a repositioning in this evolution. It's not going to be the big civic space that maybe it's been talked about in the master plan for all the reasons we've described. But I think if you are going to provide a new sort of art destination, you'd want to link that mall back so that there is still connectivity. So there is that one sort of, that was kind of that one link there to say, well, you could strengthen that link. You could do it without it, I think, but there would be benefit to it. But again, it might just be phasing and with that. I think, I guess the sort of hear all the conversation around that sort of big fruit and the opportunity. I guess the sort of counter is, do you end up sort of creating a sort of another island, right? Like that the Murray Terrace is a bit of a severance rather than a connector. Is there enough and sort of that you create this kind of destination on the big fruit that doesn't have a kind of halo effect enough because you've sort of strengthened this north, so you've gone all in on the northern edge, and as you kind of have that benefit flow, that's just a question in my mind a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking like moving a couple of the yellow boxes up from the southern end of this northwest precinct along Murray Terrace.
Yeah.
Would then create that. I mean, I guess it's creating a ribbon community in a way by doing that, isn't it? But is that what we?
I think you could. And I think hearing back to Taylor's point as well, like, if there's more yellow blocks or more open space to be developed on Big Fruit, and then being smarter about your car parking, I guess for me is it's still then saying if you do that, but your civic facility still pulls people into the centre of town, and then there's a stronger link, then that's even more benefit too, right? Rather than sort of all in on the edge, maybe strengthening the edge. And I guess that was the just to David's point, that the visualization where we're sort of, as I said, we're sort of in this phase of still refining and understanding these and seeking that feedback. We were sort of exploring visualization to help in the conversation, because it is sort of understand scale. So yeah, if you just look at that, maybe.
That ties into one of the things that we've seen councils do in some other places around New Zealand, just attract local businesses by having these really extended periods of large scale construction activities, in particular when it comes to our roads and water and all of that sort of thing.
There's nothing left to cry.
So when we look at this, I think that's probably something that we really need to factor in. How can we get it done as efficiently as possible to cause the least amount of disruption to our local business community in the middle, but also achieve the best long-term outcomes? So it's a little bit, a lot of pain for a short period of time versus a really long, drawn-out process.
So that was a core criteria, and having a look at that long list and where the solution goes. And it was certainly something that was talked about a lot in those previous iterations around, particularly the mall, because a lot of those, more ambitious investments would be painful.
Yeah.
Right. And hence why, in some ways, option X fails on a number of fronts, or is a tough one. And that was one of them. So I think 3 in some of these other options, particularly around maybe the southern end of Northwest, you have access. It's an existing car park. From a constructability point of view, you could start there. I mean, clearly the Big Fruit would be a really obvious one. But you could also see how you could enable some of these ones, because you're just building on car parks that have good access already. And most of the businesses are facing that way.
Nathan?
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points. The moving of some of the yellow boxes up into the bow tie, and one of the images you had up before, those sort of 3D render showing what it could potentially look like. And one thing that stuck out to me, I don't know if you can scroll through to those slides, is that looks amazing, looks nice and green and pretty, but if you think about that attractiveness of people driving past who don't know what's in there, for me, having a bit more retail, commercial buildings up in that bow tie area with their branding, colours, their logos, it's that sort of stuff that the first time driver going past spots and goes, oh, I know that, that's a coffee radio, I'll pull in there. To me, what we're seeing right here, right now, there isn't a lot of that. You've still got a whole lot of retail that's embedded and hidden inside that mall concept. So that's, I think, in those early steers that we gave about trying to get as much commercial retail up into the bow tie space, it was all about that, let's call it the 5 mile effect. As you're driving past there, you can see all those shops, all the brands, the colours, the logos. And whilst it's not utopia from a green space point of view, at least it's getting people to stop. And then you have your, let's call it your destination features or functions inside there that once people have stopped and pulled in, they start realising what's there or what they're seeing. Locals are going to know what's there because they're local and they're aware of it. And I also think, I don't think we should be too afraid or have a fear of leaving the existing mall behind, or at least parts of it, because what that might do in it from an evolution point of view down the track is free up new potential car parking space. Potentially, I'm not saying we abandon them all by any means, but maybe there are areas of it, let's say near the existing civic precinct, that could be repurposed into car parking or something else, and then that helps support the new vision long term. That was, yeah, just what I was thinking.
Like when I first saw that photograph, Nathan, I looked at it, thought they'd done a damn good job of camouflaging the town.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking, Charlie. To me, driving past, don't know what's there. What's going to make me now? I can't see the chemist or the subway, and that's all I think Cromwell's got is a chemist and a subway. First time driving past, now I can't even see that. So what's going to make me want to stop? Yes, I've got young kids. I can see a park, happy days. But what's going to stop the people that, oh, I didn't know they had this shop, need to stop and look in there, or I need to stop here for that eatery or that, you know, cafe, whatever it is. Yeah, you know, two different outcomes we're trying to seek with this picture versus trying to get people to stop, I think. You know, and we'll probably need to come to a mixed blend or, yeah, a balance. Yeah, and I just think, don't get me wrong, you're going to think I think 5 miles awesome, which you know, it serves a purpose, but it has got a mechanism at making you look and understand what's in there as you go past. And I just don't think we're quite getting that with these images we're seeing here.
On 5 Mile is very much of an aspiration in some respects because it doesn't, I think, and look, Queenstown's struggling with this conversation at the moment too, right? Where is the community civic heart and where is the kind of, so where is that centre of gravity? There's obviously a tension at the moment with the old town being all in on tourism and 5 Mile being the place now that is more accessible and where the commercial almost entity and shopping's heading. So they're going through a bit of that conflict, right? Which, because at the moment 5 Mile doesn't really address the kind of civic heart. So yeah, you can see the tensions that are kind of existing out of that. I think, no, I absolutely understand your point about kind of these. I think that's one aspect of kind of understanding how you're drawing people in, but the other part comes as your town grows and has the spaces. It's more than just the odd visible drive-by. It's knowing that this town is humming, its community is embracing it and kind of living, working, having events and activities, and has this great place to meet and has a destination playground. That comes through in other ways, right? That comes through in sort of media and word of mouth and a buzzy community that's kind of embracing its own life and authenticity. So those will be their own attractors in their own time. If they know.
But just over the back of this image, you've got to remember we've got Anderson Park with an existing playground set up that could be linked into this, and maybe the civic heart sits at the back of this, facing Anderson Park, and we link that, and then we rely on the bow tie in the front area being retail, civics in the middle, links back to Anderson, and you've got the whole flow through all of that precinct. Then just another angle to throw in there.
Yeah, that balance. Where do you strike that balance, right, between those things? No, I understand that. Yep.
I agree with Charlie. I just think that retail that's in the middle of there right now is still buried, and even buried more.
Need to be real conscious about legibility. So, like, if you do get drawn in there for whatever reason, where are you going to park, and what angle are you going to start walking on?
Yep.
If you want to go for a wander through the town centre,
and once you're in there, how do you get yourself out? Is the big comment at the moment. People get lost in there.
The other thing is, I said before, like developers, they work all that out.
That's their bread and butter. The height limit, how many stories can we go in that bow tie, the northwest? Are they all the same?
Mr. Robinson, do you recall the height limit of what the current restriction is? 10 metres.
3. How many stories can you get for 10 metres?
Sure.
Doing a bit.
Probably not one.
I think you would really look at ramping up, particularly for if you really want a development of Big Fruit in Northwest, you'd want to go through.
Well, and that's a big part of the next conversation. When we talk about enabling, we're talking about regional spatial planning. We're talking about a district plan that's, but also there's no mechanism for us to change it. So these are the things that we need to be looking at a wider context, so that when we are offering a piece of land in a prime location, that it's as unencumbered as possible to attract the most funding.
With the long term plan, what would you increase the heights to?
You're asking me? That's probably a good question.
Make change to the long term.
That's why it's the long-term plan doesn't determine what your heights are, it's the district plan.
LTP is
So government has said that we're not allowed to make any changes to the district plan at the moment, but we are required to undergo regional spatial planning, which may incorporate some of those changes.
So that's what we're talking about, plan change, Shirley, that's to enable what we want to do.
Yeah, I understand that.
LTP is just to get the money to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
That's, but the district plan is
That's the one previously we did plan changes, but now only private people.
It's a good option, three stories, Chris, with the icons on top.
The way I always look at this is that we've had 4 meetings, actually this is the 5th one on this. We keep kicking this ball around the park. I just think that we should cut to the chase and put it out to private developers to come up with an idea. Let's see what they reckon, what they think will work, and look at it then.
And you'd have to brace yourself for some feedback that 2 stories is too expensive and I just want to put a single story everywhere. Eventually.
And I guess the challenge with that is that private developers' job is to make money for their company.
Mhm.
Our job is to make a town centre that fits our people of today and tomorrow.
It's our job to make sure that we fit the eventual floor area over a certain area, right? Because we can have a town centre that's 3 times bigger than it needs to be, or as big as it needs to be. No. Doesn't all have to be 3 stories, but there's to be some of it, surely.
Always look at development in this respect. If council does a residential development, we'll put in green space. If a private person does a residential development, they'll put a house on, put in green space if they can. And it's about maximising profits.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, council has the control over green spaces and says, well, it's got to be this, it's got to be that.
Because we're such a big landowner in this area, it's our responsibility to create an amazing space or enable it so that we are future proofing for future generations.
And I think that we're naive if we think we've got control over what private developers do and whether or not they include green space. We've got more than one private developer subdivision in this town that our community is unhappy with the amount of green space. We've got Summerfields and we've got the Willing Tree, where both developers had said this is what they were going to do, and then when push came to shove and it became about making money, they've made money rather than providing green space.
We can't forget though that council have a history of asking developers to take green space out of developments. That isn't black and white, that's not an opinion. It's not that long ago.
So,
Just one final question for me. There seems to still be this lingering sympathy for the existing town centre. I don't share that sympathy. I'm just sort of like, they're private developers, they own land, like leave them to it. They'll either develop it or they won't. And I just don't think we should let that be determining the direction of what we can use with our land for the betterment of our community. Am I missing where this lingering sympathy is coming from and why we still want to involve the existing law?
I share that thought. I think when we talk about the town centre, there's a really clear picture in my mind, at least, that the existing mall is a precinct of the wider town centre. And I think if we start making shiny stuff around the outsides of the existing mall, then the mall will eventually have to catch up one way or another.
Yeah.
Are we all in agreement?
Yeah.
I do think it's responsible to have a conversation with them. So one of the most complexity part of this project is the fact that we need to work together with private in public. And I don't want to just toss them aside. I actually want to say, hey, we're going to share these plans and let them get excited and share their plans with us. And, and we create that excitement to do it together. So it doesn't mean we have to do it for them. It means they have to step up. But I think we definitely need to be talking to them all the time.
I think it's good to understand the level of prioritisation of drivers and how much we enable them versus the community stuff. And I think we're hearing loud and clear from elected members now on where we would like that priority sort of focused and.
And that's probably the shift between where we had the previous walk around in February, where civic facilities remained in civic centre, hearing the feedback ongoing, that was really just focusing on uplifting existing mall, but it wasn't really focusing on uplifting future potential of Northwest. So the moves that have made with the different locations being taken for civic facilities have added there's more to the town centre than just the existing mall, and also the amount of acquisition in that space to create a town centre with the size.
And that eventually became one of the major sticking points, didn't it?
Yeah.
That we were making acquisitions to create the air and costing a lot of ratepayers money to do so.
Me too, Dave. Me too.
Yeah, how much more have we got? So I guess maybe we try and summarise maybe the direction that we've got. I've definitely picked up that you'd like to see more retail just in this image that we've got here now. Capitalising on that retail space through there. Is that
It's
what I'm
probably
hearing?
worthwhile noticing
No.
all of the new buildings that
Got the
are
chair.
going up here.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think so. That's like at the end of the day, that's the people we need to develop.
Yeah.
And we can do that without it having a huge impact and closing in the mall. Is to make it available for businesses to be there.
Are you talking about the bow tie?
Yeah, both.
Yeah, right. So I'd probably counter that with going northwest and southeast to work in that current ring fence of roads first.
If we go onto the bow tie now, we've just fractured it even more than it,
Yeah.
what, like we've actually made it.
You really want to open it up.
Yeah, but you don't open it up, like when you're talking retail, what do you mean? Because in my mind, you're going to go to Queenstown for any of the big shops, or you're going to go to Wellington now. Like, we don't want to be a third 3 Parks or 5 Mile.
Well, the moment we've got 4 women on council that go to Invercargill to buy.
I buy mine online, I can't afford the petrol. And my husband's buy jobs for some fire. Mine's old. That's me, yeah.
There's no reason why the northwest
You're not
can't.
going to look at farmers, perfect example. They're not going to come and jump into Cromwell anytime soon. And you've got 2 big retail opportunities that are thriving and ramping up. Cromwell isn't the place for those.
Those big boxes.
No, and we don't want to, if we're chasing a mini 5 Mile, we've got it wrong already, because those retailers are not going to come here other than as a loss leader, maybe to be on the front so you see the sign. And I'm thinking like Mountain Warehouse, somewhere like that, where you can buy the practical stuff when you're traveling through and you need some service or whatever. Maybe that'd work. But I don't think any of those retail are going to look at here and think, oh, that's a good place to chuck one of my stores in. So we've got to think about what we mean by retail to make it successful. Like hospitality is probably our first lever to pull to get people to stop, to use the playground, have a wee, have a coffee, have some lunch when they're travelling through. They're not going to come here to shop. Our people aren't going to shop here necessarily. Like it'd be convenient, but it's not going to activate it enough to keep it going. So it's going to be smaller stores. And that might be where the mall, you get like not an outlet village, but that kind of village shopping. Maybe that's what the mall is more leaning towards.
And you need to get people to come back in to actually use the services, rather.
Yeah, but that's what's going to start it. If you drive past, and we've talked about Riverside Market as being the visual so people can understand what we're talking about. You can see something like that on the other side of a playground and a bit of green space and a bit of car parking and all of that. If you see a Riverside style building that's got cafes, bars, and you've got the other stuff, that to me is what we need to try and do with the bow tie. Keep it looking good. Everybody can get out and take the photo of the fruit, but get those other things. They're not going to stop because Mountain Warehouse is there. They're not going to stop because, they'll stop the subway, and we're potentially blocking that in. So we've got to think about that. But that's what we've got to work out, is what people are going to stop or come here for. And I think that's where
Sarah, I'd completely disagree with what you're saying. I would avoid driving to Queenstown or Wanaka If I knew that the shops were in Cromwell, I'd go there. And I actually, as a person who lives in Omakau, and we have a 4 square, and that's it. I travel to Cromwell now to come and do certain shopping. So the fact that there is more offerings would actually be something that I can categorically say that me personally, I would like to see. So I disagree that everyone will just go to Cromwell, go to Wanaka or Queenstown. So I think there is an opportunity, and I think that we just can't. We have to put everything there. That is there's an opportunity there that we could be missing out on. But I actually really agree with what Nathan said. The moment you plant all those trees and shut off that view, as you're driving past at 80 k's an hour, yes, you'll see the fruit, but you're not going to see anything else. You'll see trees and the fruit, and you'll be going straight past.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And Central Otago isn't all about trees on greenways. It's never. We haven't had that now, and I don't think we should be starting.
And that's the footpath. We have those kids and trees. Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that the commercial businesses will make up their own mind on whether they want to be in Cromwell or not. And I think that basically what we've got to do is give them the opportunity, or put the opportunity there, so that commercial businesses saying what they are, but whatever they are, will want to come in.
I think we've got to be mindful that we aren't just trying to build something that's going to pull people off the highway. We actually need to build something that's going to be for our community as well.
And then we are growing. So we do, the need is going to grow as well. And I mean, we've become seasoned that we have to go to Alexandra or Queenstown because there is nothing. But that's a learned behaviour. If there was, other retail or other businesses here, they would be used. Just a matter of actually giving them the opportunity.
There's
Because we're going to be here for a long time. We're growing.
some of the economic business case was pretty clear about where some of that demand would come from. I think there's a high demand for commercial because, there is an opportunity. There is demand. Obviously, people want to live in Cromwell, and then ultimately they'd love to work in Cromwell. And I think there's already evidence of businesses who were kind of interested and have turned away because there isn't appropriate commercial stock available. So they're sort of sitting out on the fringes, they're in your industrial area. So if you get better building stock commercially, you're going to get people who are going to work here. Those workers then want to spend money because, they want places to eat, do those sorts of things. There is definitely a shift in spending habits, particularly in the retail sector, and Chris's work in that space, First Retail, sort of identified where those shifts come from. There is a high demand of online shopping across the board. People are then seeking different experiences when they're physically coming to town and those so it's more a sort of destination experience. They're spending more time and they might be grabbing a coffee as well as a shop or going to the library or doing those other things. So it's sort of an extended experience. The benefit of that is if you create that destination, then they stay longer and they spend more. So those are the sort of benefits that flow from those. The kind of modern library and those civic activators are very different to the libraries that you imagine them to be. And those are galvanizing visitation, not just benefit to the community, but they are attractors. People are going to communities. That was one of the first buildings in Christchurch. And its activation is extraordinary in terms of people visiting for that. And all the other activators are now bringing more remote. And you'll see that not just in a big city, but in towns across the country. Blenheim's got a new library. It's kind of a modern activator. It's more than a library. It's got places to kind of free Wi-Fi, and it's got a cafe and those sorts of things. So there's sort of the way that visitors can connect with community in real spaces. I think you've got some actually quite really good business people who are interested in expanding health precinct or opportunities. So those are the types of things that you still come to town for. You come to see your physio or you come to your chemist and do those things. So you almost see an evolving precinct that maybe is gathering like-minded clusters of opportunity.
I think you've said it 100 times. It's only just sunk in that these civic buildings could actually encourage more commercial activity. And so I think that's probably something to really lead out with there in this presentation. It's not, hey, we should put our civic buildings here and here and here because we're council and we love civic buildings, but actually it should go here because that's going to mean these private houses will build 2 stories.
Well, so can we go back to our 5 priorities, Wayne? And that's sort of back to where we started. It's just on these are the considerations as the PSG have been working through these different options. Keep going. It's right near the start. So yeah, just pull one. Another one. One more. One more. So,
Oh, no, you're going the other way now.
yeah, I think we're nearly there. Just there. So the 5 things that we've across all of the conversations we've had is economic viability and constructability. Responds and addresses to the master plan community feedback, maximises and activates available land of CODC, minimising demolition and acquisition, unlocks economic potential, delivers a vibrant, accessible town square. Now, that's not in the order. These are the 5 priorities that we're looking at with everything. And so when it does come to, I think Chris picked up, and you picked up well there, Mike, around what a library attracts. And just to give some numbers, we have about 60,000 people go through that library every year, and that's not an easily accessible library as far as our town centre is concerned, you know. And so if, you know, we had the opportunity to even increase that by 30% rate, having it in the right place, and then towns, other shops and things like that around would no doubt capitalise on that as well. So
I would absolutely encourage anybody, anytime you're in a town, go and have a look at their library, because modern libraries are exceptional spaces that often got exhibitions, lots of community spaces that aren't necessarily just books, and there are some exceptional examples of that and how they activate those spaces.
They bring you quite a diverse demographic of your community together, because they're the sort of last democratic space available to your communities. And so modern libraries are sort of addressing, you know, youth activity. They usually might have a youth arm into it. They have sort of, you know, places to make stuff, and they've got usually sound rooms and things that people practice, and you know, there's and if you're sort of, but it's a space that you might be, if you're retired, you go for a coffee and still get the book section. So they usually bring a cross-section of the communities together. And then people, you know, because people are visiting, you know, part of your experience and sort of seeing community life activated. And that's when you want to come back to this place that feels busy and authentic and alive. So
maybe just a little bit of clarity for us is, just take the numbers out on the side, but these 5 priorities, are elected members comfortable with all of these 5 priorities that we're taking as a lens over the project?
Yep.
And then probably just around the second piece that we had a question on Tracy around civic facilities. Is everybody kind of clear about, we're looking at the CBD as a whole, and the reason why civic facilities being part of it is because we do see them as an enabler against these 5 priorities. And I just wanted to check if elected members are comfortable with us taking that level of prioritisation on civic facilities within the CBD that we've seen today.
Well, I think it's noting that they're kind of barely fit for purpose now, and in 10 years' time won't be. It's maybe not priority number 1, but it does need to be in the mix of considered about what it looks like in the future.
Outside of the library, what else attracts more commercial development to the facilities?
Just the ability to provide leasable office space.
Yeah.
You think you might have, be able to put in like collaborative workspaces and those sorts of things, I think. Helps.
Spaces and things like that. Yeah.
What we need that we haven't had in the past is a private developer says, I want to come and build an office block. Where can I put it? We haven't had an answer to that.
No.
So we need to get an answer to that.
Well, some private developers also go, we'll build your civic facilities for you because you're a tenant that's going to be around for a long time. And so they see a plan that has vision and they're really interested to partake in the vision. They see the commercial anchor tenant in there for a very long time, because you might sign up to, you know, at least this is just one mechanism. Because you're investing then in your open space and other aspects of it, and then you've got a long-term sort of.
And there are some very real opportunities of developments that want to be on this side of, say, Highland.
Yeah. Got a question online from Curtis.
Curtis, you had your hand up?
All good, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
The images of 3Ds that you've seen today, they are just one example of what commercial development can look like. That it can have the signs of the food things or whatever other retail sees it to be. The purpose of that there was just to show buildings, modern buildings can be on those areas, and it won't be solid buildings. There will be a mixture of green space, parking, and depending on what the market drives.
And I think it's clear that the Marston said there's nothing I've heard, even, you know, I can say that this conversation out of the walk around is, you know, more diversity, more mixed use, because those things, there hasn't been that agility in this place, right? It's been all in on the retail mall. It's kind of like there is hospitality, but it's usually existing in retail premises and not in specific kind of, you know, design facilities for that. But that diversity will bring much more resilience and more interest because, you know, as you say, that commercial attractor, you've got your daytime economy there. If you get some people living on that third or fourth floor, then you've got a day-night economy that's suddenly activated because they're more likely to go buy some food and gravitate to that hospitality. So, and those are all good things for you know, a growing town to have diverse economy and community.
Like at the end of the day, we can spend an awful lot of time talking this around the room. At some point, we've got to find out all the different groups' appetites on what they would like to see, or how they would like to present whatever they want to do. If we don't go at some point to a developer, and I'm not suggesting that you just throw it at a developer and say, come up with a scenario, but if council actually, well, does council have an appetite for a joint venture with a developer?
Not that one.
Yeah, but if you pick the developer, and there are a few good ones in the area.
I guess there's been varying history of it, but also what would we be throwing at a JV? Because right now we've looked at things and ideas that we don't have the ability to do yet, and that's sort of what the LTP will help us fund, and I guess rich community board and council to be able to include that in the LTP, then we can start to have, just my view, much easier conversations with people who might want to be commercial partners about this is what is now enabled and available out there and that we're trying to achieve. And I think that's where these workshops, having everybody together and hearing everybody's point of views and opinions, and the next step from this is to have it go through the same process, have a result by the community board and council that we are on the right track. And I think we've probably heard quite a lot here today. Is there anything that maybe anybody has wanted to say and hasn't been able to say it? Anything that maybe has come across a little bit confusing, or that you feel like we're just way off?
Actually, got a hand up for some time.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that just Anne's put a couple of messages up on the chat. I'm not sure if everyone can see that. Making a very good point. We're getting stuck down in some weeds at the moment, in my opinion. And if we are looking at the growth that Anne is suggesting that is potentially coming with fast track, etc., we've got a bigger planning piece that needs to be done prior to thinking about where we're putting buildings and things like that. And I'm just wondering if we need to have a little bit more of a planning undertone before we actually start thinking about where shops and things are going to go.
I don't think necessarily with shops and that are gonna go. And I know there's been some talk about moving yellow boxes, but the boxes don't necessarily represent anything, they just.
Yeah.
Whereas Vixland could go, I suppose, because we don't know where hotels might be and where would be residential, where would be civics, but. I do agree with Anne, it does tie into that spatial plan part, and I think we are at the start of that as opposed to saying, here's where the library will be.
I get nervous that that means more discussions.
Yeah.
And not doing anything.
So can we just be real clear, I guess, with everyone for maybe a recap? Moving forward, what is it we're doing right now? Getting direction to consult on something prior to the LTP. To me, it's really important that we have a long-term view, but have tangible bite-sized chunks for every consecutive LTP. So what is it we're looking to achieve in our first 3 years starting next year? That's, I would suggest it's a realignment of Murray shares.
Yeah.
Funding goes if we don't do that immediately, though, doesn't, but the opportunity for that. So when do we find out, Jim?
I think the business case is almost done, so I want to say that they'll be into construction sort of February next year, so I think it's imminent.
We don't need to consult them. Don't need to get money for it.
It goes to NZTA, they're the ones who get money, they give us $100 million.
That's it, we get 49% up.
Yeah, and it's the right issue, it's on my budget release, so.
So I think probably something that's helpful for us to round out this public workshop is you just mentioned things like road realignment, freeing up space and enabling that northwest precinct as a good key focus. And then probably the second thing that the PSG we could do is we'll watch this recording again and just work through what priorities could look like. Maybe if we took, like a 30-year horizon, which we kind of thought, but if we go, what could each LTP look like? It's a bit of a timeline. What could the next LTP look like? It could be planning enabling for the growing community. What can we build and construct in that time? And then what do the subsequent LTPs look like after that? That is we are looking at the entire CBD. There's a lot there, and to Councillor McLean's point, we've also got Anderson Park and the swimming pool and rose gardens and all that sort of considered as well as parking. So I feel like we've probably got a bit of a steer on prioritisation, and maybe we get that sort of clear through the next resolutions and the meetings that we have with everybody. And then that would sort of put us, that would be the CCB meeting, and we're going to be really close to the LTP. So I guess we are against the web of timeline, but we'll be able to get as much of it. That might just be very initial construction on alignment and then sort of planning to enable as part of the next LTP and working through that timeline.
Yeah. So is the construction of the realignment going to happen in February? Is it?
Yeah.
This, right.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
So I think QP can give us some better.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Can I just make a statement? These concepts that we presented today are not tangible. They're not saying civic facilities are going here, going there, or wherever. This is about getting planning changes to enable development moving forward. Now, no matter how much we'd love to get stuck into this, the demand comes from private, and they're the ones with the checkbooks, right? And if we enable that, private development will come. And we are going to have a discussion with the developer that wants to have a chat with us this week as well. So they are really interested. They're confident in this council, and they're going, you guys are just spending $45 million on Te Puna Mahara. Look what a success that is. We want to get into Cromwell. And that's what, in my mind, and that was the direction I thought was a pretty good steer, is what we were actually trying to achieve. We had a very tight timeline to get a concept plan or a couple of options, one preferred obviously, into the LTP that can be consulted on so that it could be potentially adopted. It's not saying a hotel's going to go there. It's saying this type of activity could go there. Then if the private comes in here and goes, we want to build a hotel there, they know they can. And they create the demand scenarios for this town to develop. We just need to enable them. So if we don't actually make decisions on concept plans in adopting a plan that is quite generic, but enables stuff, no private developer is going to come and invest in this town. And we're going to be going around in circles for another 10 years. That's just the bottom line thing, right? So we need to actually activate the space. We're not committing to exact. We're just saying this is enabled. I think that's the point that we really need to get across here. If you want to see progress and you don't want to see the satellite town centres all over the district popping up, we actually need to start making decisions.
Not in a workshop though, then there is a
Not in a workshop. The transaction, you know, because the team only work on your direction. You guys are the decision makers, and we just want to enable this and make it happen.
Has anyone else got anything? Mr. Chair?
No, we're all time talked out, sorry.
Another one after
That's
this.
it. Cool. We've probably got a couple of PSG catch-ups before next meetings and stuff as well, so it's probably a fair bit for us to take away as a PSG, and then sort of looping back with resolutions to board council on next steps. That's clear. Yeah, cool. Really appreciate everyone's time and discussion. I know this has been around for 17 years. Such.
Pretty much as long as that new thing down by the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, kick it around for a few more terms then.
And you know, and I think that had lots of discussion and ended up being quite a good thing, didn't it? So hopefully continue on. Yeah.
Downside more expensive than it would have been. Start, all right, let's play it.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone online.
See you all later.
Yeah.